After 20 years of saving every penny, I finally found my dream home. It wasn't a mansion, but it was perfect for me. What I didn't know was that my new neighbor would turn my American dream into a living nightmare. This is the story of how one person's need for control nearly destroyed my peace of mind, and how the truth set me free. If you've ever dealt with difficult neighbors or felt powerless against bullies, you'll want to hear this story. Let's dive in. Narrator, picture this. You're pulling into the driveway of your new home for the very first time. Your heart is racing with excitement because this represents everything you've worked for. That's exactly how I felt on a sunny Tuesday morning in March. My house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a beautiful neighborhood. To my left was a gated community with an HOA, and to my right were several independent homes like mine. I had specifically chosen this location because my house was not part of any homeowners association. After dealing with HOA restrictions at my previous home, I promised myself I'd never go through that again. Little did I know that someone in that gated community had very different ideas about boundaries and property rights. Narrator, I had barely started unloading my moving truck when I heard sharp footsteps clicking on the pavement behind me. I turned around to see a woman approaching with the kind of confident stride that usually means trouble. Karen, excuse me. You cannot park that moving truck here. This entire street falls under HOA regulations, and all moving vehicles must be pre-approved through our office. Narrator, I honestly thought she was joking at first. I actually chuckled and said, Mio, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This house isn't part of your HOA. I made absolutely sure of that before I purchased the property. Narrator, the change in her expression was immediate and unsettling. Her friendly neighbor facade melted away, replaced by something much colder. Karen, I don't think you understand. We own this street. Every single property here must follow OUR community standards, regardless of what your paperwork says. Narrator, I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was someone who genuinely believed they had authority they didn't possess. I kept my voice calm and simply said, Ma'am, I respect your community rules, but they don't apply to my property. I have the legal documents to prove it. Narrator, she stared at me for a long moment, and turned and walked away without another word. I should have known that wasn't the end of it. Narrator, over the next week, something strange started happening. Every single day, like clockwork. This woman, who I learned was named Karen, would find a new reason to visit my property. Monday morning, she knocked on my door to complain about the color of my window blinds. Tuesday, she appeared while I was assembling furniture in my living room, claiming the noise was disturbing the neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Wednesday, she actually approached my landscaper and told him he needed HOA approval before cutting my grass. Each time, I politely but firmly reminded her that her association had no jurisdiction over my property. But Karen seemed to live in an alternate reality where facts didn't matter. Narrator, on Friday morning, I woke up to find an official-looking envelope that had been shoved under my front door. Inside was a letter on HOA, a letterhead listing supposed violations on my property. Reading in a bureaucratic tone. Violation 1. Unauthorized parking in driveway. Fine, $250. Violation 2. Unapproved exterior paint color. Fine, $250. Violation 3. Improper waste bin placement. Fine, $250. Narrator, they were trying to fine me $750 for living in my own home, for things that were completely legal on my own property. Emotional pause. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at this letter, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. This is America. Nobody can just claim ownership over property they don't own, right? But in that moment, I felt truly helpless. Narrator, I decided I couldn't let this continue. I needed to take action, not just for my own peace of mind, but to protect other homeowners who might be getting bullied by this same person. Music builds dramatically. What I discovered when I started investigating would shock you. The truth about who really owned what in our neighborhood was about to turn Karen's world completely upside down. In part 2 of this story, You'll hear about the escalation that followed, including the morning I woke up to find Karen standing in my driveway, screaming at a delivery driver and making threats that would ultimately lead to her downfall. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you've ever dealt with a difficult neighbor or HOA situation, share your experience in the comments below. I read every single one. Asterisk. Welcome back to part 2 of this incredible neighbor drama. If you're just joining us, make sure to catch part 1 first. The link is in the description below. Brief recap last time. We left off with me receiving threatening letters with fake fines from an HOA that had no authority over my property. I knew I had to take action, but I had no idea how far Karen was willing to go to maintain her imaginary control. The fake violation letters were just the beginning. Karen seemed to view my resistance as a personal challenge, and she responded by launching what I can only describe as a psychological warfare campaign. It started with small things that made me question my own sanity. I'd put my garbage cans out on Tuesday night, and by Wednesday morning, they'd be dragged into the middle of the street. My mailbox would be covered with HOA flyers about mandatory property maintenance standards. But the worst part wasn't the petty vandalism. It was the constant feeling of being watched. Every time I stepped outside, there she was, clipboard in hand, taking notes about everything I did. It felt like living in a fishbowl. 3 weeks into this harassment, I decided to build a small deck in my backyard. I pulled all the proper permits, followed every city regulation, and hired licensed contractors. It was going to be my little sanctuary where I could finally relax in. That dream lasted exactly 2 days. I was at work when my contractor called me, confused and frustrated. Contractor: "Hey, we've got a problem here. A city inspector just showed up claiming there's been a report of illegal construction. Someone called in saying you're building without permits." Narrator: My heart sank. I knew immediately who had made that call. When I got home, the inspector was still there. He was actually laughing as he showed me his paperwork. "Inspector, sir, I have to tell you we get calls about this address almost weekly. Same woman, different complaints. Your permits are perfect, your contractors are licensed, and everything is up to code. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Narrator: That's when the full scope of Karen's harassment became clear. She wasn't just targeting me, she was wasting city resources and taxpayer money because she couldn't accept that she had no authority over my property. Narrator: The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in April. Had ordered new furniture for my living room, and the delivery truck was scheduled to arrive at 9 a.m. I was having my morning coffee when I heard shouting outside. Loud, angry shouting that was definitely coming from my driveway. I rushed to the window and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Karen was standing directly behind the delivery truck, arms crossed, screaming at the driver who was just trying to do his job. "Karen, you cannot make deliveries to this address. This is private HOA property and you are trespassing. I'm calling the police right now." Narrator: The poor delivery driver looked absolutely bewildered. He was probably in his 50s, just trying to make an honest living. And this woman was treating him like a criminal for delivering furniture to my house? I threw on my shoes and rushed outside. Karen, stop this immediately. This is my house, this is my delivery, and you have no right to interfere. Karen, I have every right. This street belongs to our HOA, and I won't let you turn it into some kind of commercial loading zone. Delivery driver: Look, folks, I just need to deliver this furniture. Can someone tell me what's going on here? Narrator: I felt humiliated having to prove my own property ownership in front of my neighbors, but I had no choice. I ran inside and grabbed my property deed, standing there in my own driveway. Had to show a delivery driver legal documents to prove that he could deliver furniture to my house. The absurdity of the situation was almost overwhelming. Sir, this is my property deed. As you can see, my house is not part of any HOA. You have every right to make this delivery. Narrator: The driver looked at the paperwork, and at Karen, then back at me. Delivery driver: Thank you, sir. I'll get your furniture unloaded right away. Narrator: Karen's face turned bright red. For a moment I thought she might actually explode. Karen, those documents are fake. I don't care what your paperwork says. We own this street, and I'm going to put a stop to this. Narrator. She stormed off toward her house, but not before turning back to shout, Karen, this isn't over. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. Narrator. As I watched Karen disappear into her gated community, something inside me shifted. The embarrassment and frustration I'd been feeling transformed into determination. I realized that this wasn't just about me anymore. If Karen was willing to harass city workers and delivery drivers, how many other people was she bullying? How many neighbors were living in fear of this woman's imaginary authority? That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to fight back, not with anger or retaliation, but with the one thing Karen seemed to have no respect for: the truth. Cliffhanger. What I discovered when I started digging into the legal documents would not only vindicate me completely, but it would expose just how deep Karen's delusions really went. In Part 3, you'll hear about the legal investigation that would ultimately bring Karen's reign of terror to an end. Asterisk. Narrator, welcome back to Part 3 of this unbelievable HOA neighbor story. We left off with me making the decision to fight back against Karen's harassment using legal means rather than stooping to her level. What started as a simple property boundary dispute was about to become something much bigger. A complete exposure of abuse of power that had been going on for years. Narrator. The Monday after the delivery truck incident, I took a personal day from work and drove to the county records office. I'd never done anything like this before, but I was determined to get to the bottom of Karen's claims. The clerk at the records office was incredibly helpful. When I explained my situation, she actually smiled knowingly. County clerk. Oh, must be dealing with that HOA on Maple Street. We get a lot of inquiries about property boundaries in that area. Let me pull up all the relevant documents for you, narrator. That comment stopped me cold. A lot of inquiries. How many other people had been forced to come here to prove their property rights? For the next 4 hours, I went through every legal document related to our neighborhood. Property surveys, HOA incorporation papers, city planning documents, street maintenance agreements, everything. Narrator, what I found was absolutely shocking. Not only was my house clearly outside the HOA boundaries, but the street we all lived on was maintained entirely by the city, not the HOA. But here's what really blew my mind. According to the original HOA charter from 1987, their authority was strictly limited to the properties within their gated community. They had never at any point in their history had any jurisdiction over the surrounding street or the independent houses like mine. Pause for emphasis. Karen hadn't just been wrong, she'd been wrong for potentially decades. How many people had been intimidated into compliance with rules that were never legally enforceable? Narrator, armed with a folder full of legal documents. I made an appointment with a local attorney who specialized in property law. I expected to pay for a quick consultation. But what happened next surprised me, lawyer. Sir, what you're describing isn't just neighbor harassment. It's potentially fraudulent misrepresentation of authority. If this HOA has been collecting fines or fees from properties outside their jurisdiction, that could be grounds for serious legal action. Narrator, I hadn't even considered that angle. I just wanted Karen to leave me alone, but apparently her behavior might have been actually illegal. Lawyer, let's start with a formal cease and desist letter. We'll include copies of all these county documents and make it crystal clear that any further harassment will result in legal consequences. Narrator, the lawyer drafted a comprehensive cease and desist letter that was both professional and absolutely devastating. It laid out the legal facts in terms so clear that even Karen couldn't misunderstand them. Reading portions of the letter in a legal tone, please be advised that your client has no legal authority over properties located outside the designated HOA, boundaries as established by county records dating back to 1987. Any further attempts to collect fees, issue violations, or interfere with lawful activities on 9 HOA properties may result in legal action for harassment, trespassing, and fraudulent misrepresentation. Narrator, but I didn't want to just mail this letter and hope for the best. I wanted to deliver it in person, in front of witnesses, so there could be no confusion about whether Karen and the HOA board had been properly notified. Narrator. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening. I decided to attend as a concerned neighbor. Even though I technically had no right to participate since I wasn't a member, I arrived at the community center at 7 p.m. Manila envelope containing the cease and desist letter in hand. The meeting was sparsely attended, just Karen, 5 board members, maybe a dozen residents. Karen was clearly running the show. She was standing at the front of the room, gesturing dramatically while complaining about property maintenance standards in the surrounding area. Karen, we need to take stronger action against these non-compliant homeowners. Our property values are being affected by people who think they can just ignore our community standards. Narrator. I waited for her to finish, then stood up. Me. Excuse me. I have something I'd like to present to the board. Narrator. The room went completely silent. Karen's face immediately flushed with anger. Karen, this is a private meeting for HOA members only. You have no business being here. Me. I'm here as a concerned neighbor who wants to make sure everyone understands the legal boundaries of your association's authority. Narrator. I walked to the front of the room and handed the envelope to the board president, a tired-looking man who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. Narrator. The board president opened the envelope and began reading. I watched. Karen's expression changed from anger to confusion to what I can only describe as panic. Board president. Karen. Have you seen these county records before? Karen. Those documents are obviously forged. He's trying to undermine our authority. Narrator. But the other board members were passing the papers around, and their faces told the whole story. They were seeing the truth for the first time, that Karen had been acting far beyond her actual authority. Board member. Karen, these are official county documents. If they're accurate, we may have a serious problem. Karen. I don't care what those papers say. We've been managing this entire area for years. Everyone knows we're in charge here. Narrator. That's when I realized the most shocking truth of all. The other board members had been just as misled as everyone else. Karen had convinced them that their authority extended beyond their actual boundaries. But Karen wasn't ready to give up her imaginary kingdom without a fight. What happened next would be the final confrontation that would expose her delusions to the entire neighborhood. Cliffhanger in our final episode. You'll hear about Karen's complete meltdown, the police involvement, and how the truth finally set an entire neighborhood free from years of bullying and intimidation. Asterisk. Narrator, welcome to the final part of this incredible neighbor nightmare story. We've seen harassment, legal battles, and shocking revelations. Now it's time for the ultimate confrontation and the resolution. That changed everything for our entire neighborhood. Sometimes justice comes through the courts, sometimes through karma, and sometimes, like in this story, through someone simply refusing to back down when they know they're right. Narrator, a week after delivering the cease and desist letter, I thought maybe Karen had finally gotten the message. The harassment seemed to have stopped. I was cautiously optimistic that I could finally enjoy my new home in peace. I was wrong. The following Saturday, I was working in my kitchen when I noticed movement in my backyard through the window. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor's cat or a delivery person who'd gotten lost. When I looked more carefully, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Karen was standing in my backyard, phone in hand, taking pictures of my house, my deck, my landscaping, everything. Narrator, I felt a surge of anger, unlike anything I'd experienced during this entire ordeal. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was trespassing, invasion of privacy, and possibly stalking behavior. Narrator, I walked outside and called to her from a distance. Me, Karen. What are you doing on my property? Narrator. She spun around, and for a moment, she looked almost startled. But then that familiar, defiant expression returned. Karen, I'm documenting violations for our legal case against you. We own this street and everything on it. and I have every right to inspect properties that affect our community standards. Me, Karen. You received a cease and desist letter from my attorney. You know you have no authority here. You're trespassing on private property, Karen. Your fake lawyer letters don't scare me. We owe WN this street. You can't stop me from protecting our neighborhood. Narrator, that's when I realized that Karen genuinely believed her own delusions. This wasn't just about power or control. She had somehow convinced herself that her imaginary authority was real. Despite all evidence to the contrary, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Narrator, when I told the 911 operator that someone was trespassing on my property and refusing to leave, they said an officer would be there within 10 minutes. Those were the longest 10 minutes of this entire ordeal. Karen continued taking pictures. Muttering angrily about property violations and community standards, I stayed inside, watching through my window, documenting everything with my own phone. When the police officer arrived, I felt like cavalry was finally coming over the hill. Police officer, sir, you called about a trespassing incident. Me, yes, officer. That woman has been on my property without permission, taking pictures and refusing to leave when I asked her to. Narrator. The officer approached Karen, who immediately launched into her standard speech about HOA authority and community standards. Karen. Officer. This man is part of our homeowners association, and he's refusing to follow our rules. He's been harassing our board and interfering with our authority to maintain community standards. Narrator. I watched the officer's expression carefully. He listened patiently, then asked to see the property, boundaries, and HOA documentation. I handed him my folder of county records, the same documents that had been so devastating at the board meeting. Narrator. The officer spent several minutes reviewing the legal documents. Meanwhile, Karen continued her rant about HOA rules and her authority to inspect properties. Police officer, ma'am. According to these county records, this property is not part of your homeowners association. The street is maintained by the city, not your HOA. You have no legal authority here. Karen, that's impossible. Those documents are fake. We've been managing this entire area for years. Police officer, ma'am, these are official county records. If you continue to enter this property without permission, you will be arrested for trespassing. Do you understand? Narrator. What happened next was something I'll never forget as long as I live. Karen had what I can only describe as a complete psychological breakdown. Narrator. Karen began screaming at the police officer, calling him corrupt and claiming he was part of a conspiracy to undermine HOA authority. She accused me of bribing county officials and forging legal documents. Karen, this is impossible. We owe WN this street. We own these houses. I've been in charge here for 15 years. You can't just take that away from me. Narrator. Several neighbors had come out to see what the commotion was about, including some of the HOA board members. They stood there in stunned silence. Watching Karen's complete break from reality, the police officer remained incredibly professional. Throughout the entire meltdown, police officer, ma'am, I need you to calm down and return to your own property. If I have to respond to this address again for trespassing or harassment, you will be arrested. Narrator. It took 2 board members to actually escort Karen back to the gated community. She was still screaming about ownership and authority as they led her away. Narrator. The aftermath of that incident was swift and decisive. Word about Karen's meltdown spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Within days, started receiving visitors, neighbors who had been quietly enduring years of harassment and intimidation. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 streets over told me Karen had been demanding she get HOA approval before planting flowers in her own front yard. The Johnsons had been paying fake fines for parking their car in their own driveway. The elderly couple on Oak Street had been living in fear of Karen's daily inspections for over 3 years. One by one, these neighbors learned the truth. They'd been bullied into compliance with rules that were never legally enforceable. Narrator. Within 2 weeks, a petition was circulating to remove Karen from the HOA board. But by then, it didn't matter. She had already disappeared from neighborhood life entirely. The HOA underwent a complete transformation. The new board president issued a formal apology to all the non-HOA residents who had been harassed. They established clear boundaries for their authority and actually began focusing on improving their own community instead of trying to control everyone else's. As for me, I finally got to enjoy the peace and privacy I had sought when I bought my dream home. My deck was completed without interference. My lawn was maintained according to my own standards. And my driveway became a Karen-free zone. Narrator, looking back on this experience, I learned something important about bullies. They only have the power we give them. Karen's entire reign of terror was built on fear and intimidation. But the moment someone stood up with facts and legal documentation, her imaginary authority crumbled completely. Sometimes, the best way to deal with difficult people isn't to fight fire with fire, it's to shine the light of truth on their behavior and let reality do the rest. Today, I still live in my dream home, and it really is everything I hoped it would be. The neighborhood is peaceful. The true HOA focuses on their own community, and Karen ... Well, let's just say I haven't seen her taking any unauthorized photographs lately. Narrator warm. Concluding tone. The most satisfying part of this whole experience wasn't proving Karen wrong, it was watching an entire neighborhood regain their freedom and peace of mind. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Narrator. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor or HOA situation like this? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, knowledge is power. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply know your rights and stand your ground when you know you're right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story. Asterisk.